evening, everyone. Hi. Wow, what a crowd. Welcome to the National Writer Series, an evening with Erin Whiting and Ann Patchett. We're pleased to welcome Ann back to our stage, and thank you for coming in on this beautiful summer evening. It is a packed house. Here to talk about cherries and love and marriage. It's a special honor to have Ann back. I knew Ann as a graduate student at the Iowa Writers Workshop, and I was a fan, I told her last night, way back then, because her writing was already so deft and insightful, and every Tuesday a story would appear on the shelf in the English philosophy building, and we'd go grab them and read them for the workshop, and already it was quite clear that she was headed for greatness. And in fact, this week, her book, which you have for sale out there, Tom Lake, is #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. Both in the ebook version and in its print. So that is a huge, and this is just the beginning, the third stop on a 26-city book tour. The writing in that novel, if you haven't purchased it yet, is amazing. It is the interesting thing about this novel is the writing is as smart as the characters. Often, if you read genre fiction, you'll notice like Lee Child writes an amazing book, but Jack Reacher is not as smart as Lee Child. Lee sat here on this stage and we had that discussion at one point. But this writing, as T.S. Eliot said about a poem, is like seeing the nervous system thrown in a pattern on the wall. And that's what her prose does, is it illuminates the human condition in a very quotidian way, but also a very universal way. And it's set right here in our hometown. So it's amazing.
Thank you, Doug. Doug is a co-founder, so am I. I'm also the executive director, and I just want to welcome all of you, and also there's 200 in the virtual audience. And I just want to tell you from Atlanta, Georgia, welcome, Indianapolis, Cincinnati, North Carolina, Berkeley, California, Aurora, Colorado, Irving, California, Alexandria, Virginia, Pennsylvania, Idaho, Vermont. So this is cool. I'm going to thank our sponsors. They underwrite the cost. They make all this possible. They keep our ticket prices low at $20 plus the book. And I have to tell you, Ann and all the authors fully appreciate you buying the book with the ticket. I know it's a new thing, it's ticket bundling, but I can't tell you how much the authors and the publishers appreciate it. Thank you for doing that. Thank you to event sponsor Lola Jackson and Dillis Tostason Garcia in honor of the Grand Traverse Regional Land Conservancy. Thank you. And thanks to our major sponsors, Begonia Charitable Foundation and Diana Mylock, who has supported us from the beginning, Northgard Technology Group, which takes an approach of relationships and trust with its IT clients, Northwest Michigan Arts and Culture Network, providing terrific support to nonprofit arts groups like us, and a literary underwriter who wishes to remain unnamed. And, and Michigan Arts and Culture Council and the National Endowment of the Arts, who make this event possible.
The Dragonfly Fund and Gerstacker Foundation support our Raising Writers programs, and if any of you in the audience have young people in your life, please go to our website and avail yourselves of the often free services that we offer for the writers whom we hope one day will be on this stage with their debut novel, at which point we'll just hang up the hat and go home. I promise. Interlochen Public Radio, they air our shows most every Friday afternoon. Thank you. The other major media sponsors are the Record Eagle and My North. Thank you, My North. Also publishes Traverse Magazine. I know that Kara McDonald, the editor-in-chief, is in the house, and she will be on stage here in November with chef and TV personality Erin French. So thank you, Kara, and welcome, Erin. Horizon Books, down the street, one of the great bookstores maybe on Front Street for 60 years, which is a feat for any business in this climate. And Cherry Capital Airport, we looked around and we decided Cherry Capital would be our airport. Well, there is one in Thompsonville, but it's a grass strip. And then thanks to Brenda and Ross Biederman and Susie and Bill Janis, for hosting our major fundraiser last night at the Biederman home with Ann Patchett and Erin Whiting. It was fabulous. And also, thanks to our small but mighty staff, Ann is the only full-time employee thus far. We have, however, we really do have other full-time employees, but they give us extra hours making things happen. Joelle, maybe Noelle Riley, Colleen Zanotti, and Angie Avis. So thank you. All right. So just one more thing about Raising Writers. Those new classes are going to start this fall. There's one on free college essay writing, which is really important. We want to encourage opportunities, and we feel that this is an important one, so please check out our website. I'm going to introduce Erin now, if that's okay. Yeah. I've gotten to know Erin and then I promise you, Erin is going to come on stage and introduce and bring out her friend, Ann Patchett. I've gotten to know Erin a little bit. It's funny, we both went to Interlochen, and there was so much about her that I didn't know. She grew up on a cherry farm in Elk Rapids. I worked on a cherry farm with my history teacher, Mike McManus, got ran over by the conveyor belt when I was 16. Nothing got broken. If it happened today, I'd be in a body cast. But every kid in town seems to have worked on a cherry farm at one point or another, right, who grows up here. She did that, and she got a Bachelor of Arts from Sarah Lawrence, as did Ann Patchett, and a diploma from Interlochen, where she studied creative writing, and she was named a presidential scholar in the arts. And after several years, she went to New York City, which I didn't know, and she worked in publishing. And then she returned to TC, where she introduced to the world of conservancy at the Grand Traverse Regional Land Conservancy, which, as Ann said, yes, there you go, is honored this tonight by the events under Writers Tonight. So eventually, she answered an opportunity to continue her career at Interlochen. She spent 6 years there working in the alumni and supporters office. In 2014, she became the executive director of Parallel 45, one of our favorite summer activities in Traverse City. It was a professional arts organization that she co-founded, and we were so privileged to experience what it offered us. She's now back at the Conservancy. That is knitted into tonight's message with Tom Lake, the novel. They'll talk about that. She's the senior charitable giving specialist, so if you have some extra cash on hand, please talk to her after the show. And they are helping to protect the irreplaceable and scenic farmlands that do define our region. She lives in TC with her husband, keynote speaker, magician Ben Whiting, also who has been a board member at NWS, and their very good dog, Scooter. Please welcome Erin to the stage.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm going to do a short introduction of Ann Patchett, which probably isn't even necessary, but I've got to do it anyway. Ann Patchett is the author of 9 novels, including the most recent Tom Lake. She was the editor of the Best American Short Stories 2006, and has also written 4 books of nonfiction. And in 2019, she published her first children's book. She's a graduate of Sarah Lawrence College and the Iowa Writers Workshop, and is the recipient of numerous awards and fellowships, including the England's Women's Prize, formerly the Orange Prize, the Penn Faulkner Award, a Guggenheim Fellowship, and her novel, The Dutch House, was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. Her books have been both New York Times notable books and New York Times bestsellers. It have been translated into more than 30 languages. In 2012, Time magazine named her one of the 100 most influential people in the world. In November of 2011, she opened Parnassus Books in Nashville and has since become a spokesperson for independent booksellers. And in March of this year, she was awarded the National Humanities Medal by President Joe Biden. Please welcome to the stage my dear friend, Ann Patchett, and my dog, Scooter. Well, we're going to try this out.
You know what? We're done. We just killed it. There is nothing bad can happen when you have an adorable little dog on your lap.
It's true. This was the only way that Anne could spend some time with Scooter. She's my dog's second mother. And this is just how it worked out. So we're going to try it.
Are we going to start off by telling our origin story?
I think we should.
Okay.
We should tell how this all came to pass.
Because this is a crazy story of our friendship. I figured this out the other day. It must have been 2013 because we'd opened the bookstore in 2011.
I was not married yet.
You were not married, but you were engaged.
We were engaged.
And Ben was driving from Michigan to Georgia to see his parents, and he was listening to Fresh Air on the radio. And I had a new book out called This is the Story of a Happy Marriage. And you know what? We really shouldn't do this because we've got so much ground to cover. And he was near Nashville, and when he was listening to me on the radio, he kept thinking that I reminded him so much of his fiancée, or that he thought his fiancée and I would be the best friends in the world because we had so many things in common. Sarah Lawrence, writing, our sense of humor, an extraordinarily brief and disastrous first marriage, and
just gonna lay that all out here this evening. You're welcome.
And so Ben, while he was listening, just happened to be really close to Nashville, and he pulled off the interstate to go to my bookstore, Parnassus, and I wasn't there, but my dog was there, Sparky. And Ben left me a note saying, "You remind me so much of my fiance, but also we have the same dog."
He wrote his email and just left it and told me he had done this and said, "I'm sure I'll never hear from her." It was sort of crazy, but why not try?
And I never email people back. If people send me an address, I will write them back if they write me a letter, but I won't email people because I don't ever want people to have my email. But I wanted to see a picture of Ben's dog. So I emailed him, and then we had a period of friendship in which we just emailed pictures of our dog back and forth.
In fact, her first email to Ben was just, "Send me a picture of your dog." Like nothing else.
Right.
No pleasantries, no niceties.
I wanted to know if he was telling the truth. Right?
Yeah, you had to ground truth this. Were we just stalkers, or did we have a dog?
Exactly. And so this went on for a while, and you guys were married when I met you.
Yes. We were finally coming through Nashville on our way to Georgia for Thanksgiving to see Ben's family.
And Ben emailed me and said, maybe we could stop off. We'll have Scooter. Maybe Sparky and Scooter could meet. And I, because this is the way I fly, said, "Oh, why don't you all just come and spend the night?" And I have to say, Ben, who is one of the funniest people I have ever known in my life, parked down the block. Do you remember this? And just came to the house by himself. And he was like, "Hi, my wife and dog couldn't make it."
Oh, I forgot he did that.
I thought maybe I would just stay with you for a few days.
So then the alarms were really going off. Oh God, I knew this was all fake. This wasn't real.
And then you and Scooter walked up the street, and Sparky came out, and never have two dogs loved each other so much. To the point of insanity.
No, it's real. Like they're absolutely obsessed with one another.
So when they go on trips, long trips, because Ben works as a magician on cruise ships from time to time, they will come from Traverse City to Nashville, drop Scooter off at my house. I kid you not. My husband is a pilot, and once we flew Scooter back to Traverse City.
It was just so much more convenient. Now he will not fly commercial for anything.
Yeah, you thought we were going to talk about a book, but
we'll get there.
we really will. But it's been such an amazing friendship, and you guys come to Nashville to see us, and we come to Traverse City to see you, and it cracks me up because I have met a lot of people on this book tour, and in the Michigan section of this book tour, and they're like, "Hey, have you ever been to Traverse City before? Did you ever go to Michigan?" I'm like, "Yeah, I go to Michigan every chance I get because there's a little dog. There's a little dog." I mean, I like Ben and Erin a lot, but there is a little dog that's really important.
I understand where we stand in the order of things. But it is not your first trip to Michigan, despite all those questions.
It is.
What was your first trip to Michigan, Ann?
My first trip, I'm so glad you asked.
Thank you.
My first trip to Michigan was in January of 1983. I was at Sarah Lawrence, and my shall remain nameless freshman year best friend transferred to the University of Michigan because she hated Sarah Lawrence. And in January, so the beginning of her second semester at Michigan, I came to visit her because who wouldn't want to go to Ann Arbor in January? And the day after I got there, she was trying out for a chorus line. And so we went to this huge gymnasium, and there was a folding table set up, and there were a group of people who were, talking to all of the people crammed into the gym. They said, "You're going to come in one at a time and sing your part, and then you're going to go back in the hall. Nobody who's auditioning can watch the auditions." So they all went out into the hall, but I wasn't auditioning. And so I sat down in a folding chair against the wall, and then I got trapped. I mean, I just wasn't really thinking, but I watched 3 hours of people trying out for a chorus line. I dug right down to the bottom of my soul, and I tried to melt.
That didn't show up in Tom Lake.
No, it
A chorus
did.
line is not in Tom
No,
Lake.
the chorus line's not the musical, but the experience is the opening
Certainly.
of the book, because it is about a high school girl who is registering people for our town. She has no interest in being an actress. She has no interest in trying out for our town. But she gets trapped in the gym while everybody else is trying out one at a time. They can't see each other. And they are so bad, especially the girls playing Emily, that she gets disgusted because she loves the play. And she finally just thinks, if you would just say these beautiful lines. Are you comfortable? Is that right?
Scooter.
It's okay. I got you. They are doing such a bad job that she finally gets up and just reads for Emily as simply and in as straightforward a way as she can. And she gets the part. And that's what sets the whole book into motion.
And almost everyone, I don't know if everyone in this room has read Our Town, but many of you have probably read that play. And what about the play? What is it about Our Town that gets you every time?
That gets me every time. It's really interesting. I was being interviewed recently on the radio somewhere, and someone said, at what point in putting the novel together did you decide that Our Town was going to be the play that Laura tries out for? And I said, oh, no. I decided I was going to write a novel about our town, and then decided it was going to be about a woman who had played Emily in high school. So it definitely started with Our Town. And when I was 9 years old, my best friend Tavia Cathcart was like an extra child in our town. Her father was a theater teacher at a big public high school, and they were putting on Our Town. And so they would go to rehearsals. She and her sister would go to rehearsals every night, and I would go along sometimes. I read the play for the first time probably when I was 14, and I'm 59, and I think that I have read the play at least once every year since then. It only takes an hour and a half. It's not a big deal.
Good yearly ritual.
But
Start doing
it
that.
really is such a touchstone. Do you have that experience with Our Town?
I do. So Our Town was the first play that Parallel 45 did in 2010.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Really?
No.
All this time? Like we can still surprise each other all this time. It was, yeah. And I had probably read the play 50 times before we did it and never, I think, truly started to understand or appreciate it till I was in my 30s. Now that I'm in my 40s, it hits in an entirely different way.
Yeah. I mean, I think about the fact that the only role that I could play in Our Town now is the stage manager. I've aged out of all of the other parts. And for those of you who haven't read it, Our Town is a play in 3 acts. The first act kind of introduces the town, and George and Emily are in high school and they live next door to one another. The Webbses and the Gibbs live next door to each other. And then in the second act, they get married. And in the third act, Emily dies in childbirth and she gets to go back for a moment and see her life again. And at this point in my life, it really is almost a Buddhist text for me, because it's about realizing that your life is only made up of a series of small moments, and that either you can be present for them or you can wish them away by looking ahead or wanting other things. And that's why I keep going back to it, because Our Town is just, it always whacks me back into my lane and wakes me up again. And I think this is life. It's not life is going to start when this happens, when that happens. I'm on book tour, when book tour is done, then I'm going to really start things. It's like, this is it, today.
Right, today with this dog
with
on
this
your
dog
lap
on my lap,
is-
and my friend and all of you. And so that is the play that Laura is in, but it also, in a way, becomes the theme of the book, because it is about appreciating the beauty and the joy in the smallness of life.
And for those of you who haven't gotten to read Tom Lake yet, because it is very new, I just want to ask Anne, well, I have some things here people have said about Tom Lake as they've tried to describe what it's about. Perhaps your finest novel yet, says the Boston Globe.
You're going to read
But-
my reviews?
No.
I
But I'm
haven't-
gonna read
I
what
haven't
they
read them.
say. I know you don't read reviews. That's why I'm telling
no,
you
no.
what they said. You don't read them. But there are a few themes that keep getting brought up. It's a meditation on maternal and romantic love. It's your pandemic novel. It's a book about the anxiety of youth and the contentment of old age. What is Tom Lake about? What would you actually say it was about?
I don't know who wrote all those things, but a lot of that is very true. One of the things that I was thinking about, the anxiety of youth, the contentment of old age, the character is 57, and that it is about the difference between young love and married love, and that they're both extremely wonderful, valid kinds of experiences, but almost entirely disconnected from one another. And so part of this story is in 1988 at a mythical summer stock theater called Tom Lake. And then the other part of and in that part of the story, Laura is 24. She is now playing Emily for the third time, once in high school, once in college. She got scouted, went to Hollywood, made a movie, and then came to this prestigious summer stock to play Emily again, and meets the actor Peter Duke, who is, just a guy in the play. He's playing her father. He's scorching hot. They start up almost immediately. And at the end of the summer, Emily decides, Laura decides that she doesn't want to be an actor, and Peter Duke goes on to be the most famous actor of his generation. So that sort of insane, scorching love of 24 then is countered with the present, in which she's married to Joe, and they live on a cherry farm in Traverse City, and they have 3 daughters who are 22, 24, and 26, and the daughters are saying, you have to tell us about what happened when you were 24, because we have to take all of these damn cherries off the tree, because there's nobody here to help us.
It's COVID and there's no help, and we're it.
We're it, so in return, you have to tell us the story. And those 2 narratives go back and forth. But I think about the difference between, my marriage and my husband. We've been together for 30 years, and almost 30 years. And the guys that I dated when I was in my 20s. And when I was in my 20s, I liked men who smoked unfiltered cigarettes and read Proust in French, and men who, if you went for a walk at 2 o'clock in the morning, you could find them drunk in a bar talking about the meaning of life.
Real artists.
Real artists.
Yes.
They suffered. Oh, Erin, they suffered so terribly.
Yes. And they would take you along for that ride if you were willing to go.
Because I could comfort them in their suffering.
Yes.
I could help them because I understood them and how they suffered. Erin and Ben and I and my friend Judy, who's here, we went to see the Barbie movie last night after the gala at 9:30. We left the gala, we got in the car, and I was like, I wonder what time Barbie starts. And Ben was like, 9:25, we can do this.
We can go.
But yes, we were the Barbies. We were there to comfort and be beautiful and cheer along.
Help them as they played their guitars at us.
We were helpers. We were the helpmates.
You've seen that movie.
And the married love, which may not be as scorching after 30 years, though still quite good. It's such a different kind of love, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world, for any of those motorcycle riding poets that I knew back at the Iowa Writers Workshop. Yeah, and yet when you're telling that story, to tell that story to 3 young women in their 20s, yes, he was this unbelievably hot guy who went on to become, George Clooney equivalent. But I would still choose your father any day of the week. That makes no sense to them.
They're incredulous. They just can't. They're like,
right.
You have got this wrong. In fact, tell it again. Like, that's not right.
And this is a novel that is not about nostalgia, and it is not about regret. It is about trying to explain that the things that you might think somebody else would want are not the things they actually want. Now, I'm going to repeat a compliment that I got because I loved it. I sent the advanced copy of the book to my pal Barbara Kingsolver, and when she read it, she said it is a completely unjealous novel, and I think that's it. It's really heartwarming, but it's also really true. It's about wanting the life you have. It is about not looking backwards at your own life or at anybody else's life and thinking, I wish that I had that, which is not to say that their family is without trouble,
No, not at all.
without sadness. As my friend Judy always says, if everybody put their troubles in the middle of the room, you would get up and take yours back. Yeah.
And that's a really hard thing, I think, in the book represented by the daughters, but for anyone who's ever had parents to understand or believe about your parents. And I remember you wrote something, I think it was in your essay, This is the Story of a Happy Marriage, about the very difficult failure of imagination that children have about their parents, that anything interesting, I think anything at all could have happened in the before time,
Right.
meaning before they existed. And I think we can all relate to that.
I think that's so true. I mean, I feel like I knew my parents. No, my father is dead. I know my mother really well. I felt like I knew my father very well. But But really, it's sort of strange general outlines that I have filled in with my own sloppy imagination. And at one point, I was working on a project about the Los Angeles Police Department. My father was a police officer in Los Angeles for 35 years. And when I went to write about it, I started to interview him and just sit down and say, okay, what happened here? What happened here? I had everything wrong. I mean, I had just like wholesale made up his life and what happened.
Like the daughters in the book, at times even question their mother and say, no, that's not right. Remember, it happened like this.
Right.
And she's like, it's my life. It happened to me.
They treat her like she's an idiot. You know,
Yeah,
like, Mom, you're so
please."
old, you don't remember.
Yeah.
That's when you went to LA and then you went to New Hampshire. And she was like, no.
Not at all.
Can I read that little piece
You should
about
read
how
that
happy?
piece, yeah.
Which means, we're going to have a handoff.
We're going to have to switch.
Okay, here we go. Don't try this at home. Because this will fit in very nicely. This is super short, so don't be scared. Because I own a bookstore, I know people don't like reading anymore, or if they like reading, they like one page. This is a little less than a page. So the daughters are Maisie and Emily and Nell, and this little tiny moment takes place near the end of the book after a giant thunderstorm. Maisie and Nell get their hats, their bug spray, and go into the great dripping world wearing muck boots. I stay behind to make lunch, which I should have been working on while I was talking all this time. The past need not be so all-encompassing that it renders us incapable of making egg salad. The past, were I to type it up, may look like a disaster, but regardless of how it ended, we all had many good days. In that sense, the past is like the present, because the present, this unparalleled disaster, is the happiest time of my life. Joe and I here on this farm, our 3 girls grown and gone and then returned, all of us working together to take the cherries off the trees. Ask a girl who left Tom Lake what she wanted out of life, and she never in a million years would have said the Nelson Farm in Traverse City, Michigan. But as it turned out, it was all she wanted. Once I finish with the sandwiches and put the bags of cookies and chips in a backpack, I walk out past the kitchen garden. The lettuce and tomato plants and zinnias are already straightening up from the beating they've taken. Those tiny periwinkle butterflies are working their rounds. Where do the periwinkles go in rain like that? It's not that I am unaware of suffering and the soon-to-be more suffering in the world. It's that I know that the suffering exists beside wet grass and a bright blue sky scrubbed by rain. The beauty and the suffering are equally true. Our town taught me that. I had memorized the lessons before I understood what they meant. No matter how many years ago I stopped playing Emily, she is still here. All of Grover's Corners is in me. Now, if you, no, don't do that. I don't know why, clapping just really bugs me. If you liked that, thank you. But if you think that was good, I'd just like it to be a little bit better. Well, then, you could listen to the audiobook, and Meryl Streep will read it to you. How did that happen, you might want to know? Yeah, right?
We very much want to know. Although I think Scooter wants to come back to
I
your
hope he will.
lap.
Excuse me, just one second. We're going to pause for station identification. That's right. He used to be your dog.
Yeah.
Okay. So you may remember, or you may not know, that Tom Hanks read my last novel, The Dutch House. He did a super job. And it empowered me. because I just asked him. I knew him enough to ask him. I had his email. And he said, oh, sure, that sounds like fun. And I thought, well, I wonder if I could get Tom Hanks. I wonder if I could get, say, Meryl Streep. Meryl Streep has 3 daughters. Hers was certainly the voice in my head, but let's be honest, hers is the voice in everyone's head. And I had met Meryl Streep 15 years ago. We had lunch. And the reason we had lunch is there was a period of about 8 minutes where it looked like she might play Roxanne Koss in the movie of Bel Canto. That didn't work out, and that was very sad for me, and I think for Meryl as well. And I had a feeling that she would remember, because of the ensuing sadness around that project, that she would remember that she had met me. And my agent is a woman named Felicity Blunt. And oh, you guys, you got it already? Yeah, so Felicity Blunt is the sister of Emily Blunt, and Felicity Blunt is married to Stanley Tucci, and Stanley Tucci played Meryl Streep's husband in Julia and Julia. So,
Very direct line.
Yes,
to Meryl
well,
Streep.
you know, my father's a cop, so I know how to track people down. So I emailed Felicity and I said, I'd like to ask Meryl if she might possibly record the audiobook. Would you send her a note if I wrote a note? And Felicity said, no, but here's her email. So I wrote to her, I said, this is what the book is about. In maybe 3 or 4 sentences, because nobody likes a long email. Remember that. And
You taught me that, really.
and she has 3 daughters, and she wrote back the next day, and she said, I am so honored that you would think of me. She just cracks me up, right? Really? I have been thinking about you ever since I met you 15 years ago. And she said, I would love to read the audiobook. And I said, don't you want to read the novel first and see if you like it? And she said, no, it sounds great. I'm going to be really, really busy. I can read the book in January, and then I can record it in the beginning of February. And she did. And I got to go. It was 4 days of work, and I got to go for the first 2 days. And it was done in a studio where they dub films, where she's worked for 30 years, so that when we came in the morning, everybody was like, oh, Meryl, yay. And it was a giant, heavily carpeted room with a movie screen on one side and a mic stand in the middle of the room, and she sat in a chair and read, and then there was a big comfy couch behind her, and the director and I sat on the couch. That's not the way it usually works. And the producer's booth was behind us. And Meryl Streep, as one might imagine, does not make mistakes and does not need to take a break. The woman just goes, and she's lovely and brilliant and everything you hope she is. And so the second day, she finally stopped to take a sip of water or something. And I said, I cried. I cried when you read that scene. And I said, that's just so embarrassing. I wrote that scene. I know what happened in that scene, and I cried. The thing you have to know is I am somebody who cries once every 5 years, and I cry about 4 tears. So that said, I won't cry again for another 4.5 years. And Meryl Streep said, oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. She said, sometimes late at night I turn on the television and one of my old movies is on and I'll start watching it and I'll cry.
I've always wondered that. I'm like, do they watch their movies?
I wondered that too.
Do stars that big? Because the movies are ubiquitous. They're always on TV. You can't flip through without finding one.
Right.
And she really does.
Yeah. I mean, she
that
made
tonight.
it sound like she didn't mean to. She just got sucked into it. Like, I wouldn't read one of my books again for anything. Anything. And that's really true of just about all the writers I know. Just
Would not go back there.
No,
Don't
no,
need
no.
to revisit it.
No,
Been to that world.
Because by the time you've finished a novel, by the time it gets to the point where you're not allowed to make changes anymore, you've practically memorized it. You have read it so many times through the editing, through the page proofs, through the copy editing. I don't ever want to see this. People say to me all the time, "Oh, do you miss the characters? Do you miss them?" And I'm like, "Who are you talking about? Those
They're
people that
gone.
I made up? They're not people."
You are destroying
I'm sorry.
this for everybody.
Yeah, never mind. I miss
Revise
them
that statement.
every day. Yes, good,
Yeah,
good. All
miss
right,
them.
all right.
Tears. Those tears are about the
Yeah,
characters.
yeah.
And some of those characters came from, well, we had a beautiful day today. Just want to mention that we had a glorious afternoon on a farm on Old Mission that was one of the inspiration
It was.
location for the book.
Yes.
And the whole Wunsch family is here, like down here in the second row. Just want to acknowledge that they're here. And
I love you, Wunches. It's so deep. And Erin, okay, well, but this is the part that we need to talk about, is your role in this novel, which is enormous. I wanted to write a novel about a cherry orchard and a professional theater company.
it's the one time I am like uniquely qualified to research a book. This is never going to happen again. I know a lot of esoteric niche things that won't ever come up from undergrad and other things I've studied, but this is my moment.
Phenomenal. Like, you were the friend. I couldn't replicate you. It would be impossible. But I would write Erin long lists of questions and say, okay, you've got a farm. When do you harvest sweets? When do you harvest tarts? What's the overlap between the cherries and the apple? And she would just write these long paragraphs back, answering everything. And then the same, I would send all of the questions about theater companies. I had no idea that when your play is running at night, you are then rehearsing the play that is going to follow that play. And when I came up to Traverse City to see my friends and to do research, she took me to the Wunsch farm. I was like, okay, I need a farm that's like this, 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 and this. And Erin said, got it.
Got it. And Barb and her whole family were so gracious.
Unbelievable. And to go back to that farm today, after I had written the book, and see it through the eyes of the characters, I mean, I felt like I was stepping in to my novel. And if the book becomes a big success, you could charge people. You could have the Tom Lake tour and say, this is the kitchen garden, and this is, this is the view from the kitchen window, because it was all your house and your farm and your life. And I'm so unbelievably grateful to you and your family, and to you, because what would I have done? I don't have any idea. I mean,
You need more farmer friends.
Everybody
theater
needs
friends.
more farmer friends. And when I'm going out, and people, I think this is so funny, people always say to me, so were you an actress? You must have been an actress.
How could you write about something you never did? That's
Because
just
you just got it
crazy.
right. But no one ever has said to me, were you a cherry farmer? And yet, what people say about that is, it's bizarre. She got all the cherry farming details right. How did she do that? Like, was that a lucky guess? No, I'm a trained professional.
I loved this work. It was a very happy year between the end of 2021 and like the summer of 22. And I had a lot of help too, because I only know enough to be dangerous, but I know a lot of farmers, and I know what I have to ask. So thanks to the Wunches. And also Jim Nugent was like incredibly helpful.
Absolutely.
I don't know if Jim is here. I think he might have been. Oh, good. Someone knows Jim Nugent. Jim Nugent's amazing.
Yes.
He's great.
And also, there was in my mind, a whole second line in the book that didn't make it in, which was, I thought that there was going to be a dead body that would have to be shipped from Capri, Italy.
Which I was really excited to research, but it turns out,
It
because the
turned out
question
we-
was, how do we get a body? Like, what would be the process, especially a famous person, from Capri back to the US? Like, how would that happen? Then I realized I speak no Italian, so that was going to be a rough call to the, Italian funeral homes and mortuary. But I have a dear friend, Emily Modrell, who does speak wonderful Italian, and she had a lot of fun conversations with mortuary departments, and in Italian, she met some very colorful characters, learned all about how it works. So a lot of people came together.
And then I wound up not needing it. But still, this is actually
Thank
the
you,
joy.
Emily.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is the joy of writing a novel, is getting to learn things that you don't know anything about. And I think that for so many adults, we don't have that experience where you just think, oh, opera. I don't know anything about opera. I've never been to an opera. I've never listened to more than an aria. I'm going to write a book about opera. Here we go. I'm going to write a book about the Amazon. I've never been to the Amazon. I don't know anything about vaccinations or snakes. Why not? Because you get to learn. And it is the most gratifying thing in the world to go to another person and say, tell me what you know. When I was writing State of Wonder, I wanted to know about malaria. And I met a guy at a party who was an epidemiologist. And I said, do you know anything about malaria? And he said, I know a guy who's the head malarialist, you say it, at the Bethesda Naval Hospital. And here's his email. And I emailed him and I was like, hey, I'm really interested in malaria. I didn't say I'm a novelist. I didn't say anything. I'm really interested in malaria. Can I come and just shadow you for the day? And he said, I'd love it. And my husband's a doctor. He came with me, and we went to the Bethesda Naval Hospital, where they do like the cutting edge vaccination studies. And I just followed this man around all day, and he never asked me why.
Never.
He was just so
Focused?
happy.
And happy that anyone
some-
cared. Some layperson cared.
Somebody wanted to see all the mosquitoes
Yeah.
and talk about.
That was probably the best day of his life, saving lives and all that. But
It was
you were there.
so incredible. I mean, I did at some point tell him what I was doing. And he said that they were always looking for people to test the vaccine on. And what that, and what that meant was that they give you the vaccine, and then they have 5 malaria mosquitoes bite you. And the way they do that, I don't know why I'm going off on this tangent, but it's a good one. They put the mosquitoes in a cup, like a plastic big gulp cup, and then they take a piece of pantyhose and they stretch it over. Do you want to get down?
You need to go see Dad. He is right
just wander
there.
around for a minute. They stretch some pantyhose over the cup, put a rubber band around it, and you hold it on your leg until you have 5 bites. Then they kill those mosquitoes. They euthanize them, and they
Humanely, I'm sure.
yes, they put them on a slide. They make sure they have malaria, and then they check you into a hotel room. And the doctors, it's an adjoining hotel room, like at the Sheraton, and the doctors sleep in one room and you sleep in the other. For whatever reason, everybody gets malaria in the middle of the night. And then you get
that seems
malaria because the vaccine doesn't work. And then they come in and they give you the anti-malarial drugs. And I was like, me, pick me. I want to do this. This is so cool. I want to get malaria. I want to get a test vaccine. But I also write for the New York Times, and it turns out the government is not interested in giving malaria to people who write for the New York Times.
Draw your own conclusions as to why. Who knew?
Yeah, so it really is adventures in research. So in the same way that I love to think about malaria, I love to think about tree grafting, and how long everything takes. Tell us.
This is just.
I mean, I know you guys are from Traverse City, but talk for a second about how long it takes to put a tree
Well, you really got this right
together.
in the book.
I really got it right because you told me how to do it,
really
Erin,
did.
and then you read it before it was published.
I did. I checked. It takes years and years and years for a fruit tree to produce anything. I mean, sometimes it can take 15 years. It can at least take 10. It depends on how you buy the tree and what state it is purchased in. But you're talking it could be a decade of an investment before you're like really cranking with some fruit trees. And not to mention the amount of time you have to spend preparing the orchard, taking care of the orchard. Some years it's not going to work out. I mean, the amount of time that goes into something, and this is of course true of all farming, but fruit trees particularly, because they take so long to come to fruition. I don't know if those are related words.
It's a
but
good
yeah.
joke.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. With fruit trees especially, you just have to really love it because you are doing something that may not even ever work out. I mean, you're just taking a real chance there.
Do you know what this sounds like? And I have never had this thought before. Writing a novel. When we bought our house, the guy we bought our house from was a songwriter, is a songwriter, just the most depressing person in the world. And he was at our house. It was Halloween. His kids were trick-or-treating. He came back into the house that used to be his house. And we were talking, and he said, I don't know how you can write a novel. He said, if I write a song and it's bad and it doesn't work out, 30 minutes of my life are gone. He said, you write a novel that's bad and it doesn't work out, what is it, like 2 or 3 years? Just totally
down the tubes.
Down the tubes. But yeah, it takes a lot of faith in the system to put together a cherry tree. He's asleep under your chair.
Oh, okay. And then other factors can come in. You can deal with weather. It's just, things that you never anticipate could really knock you off course.
Right.
That is a good metaphor.
Yeah, absolutely.
How are you doing, Scoot?
I think we're doing really well.
doing good
Do you
there.
think that it's time to open it up for questions?
I have right before, I do
you
want to
do?
just
Oh,
go
you
back
got one
to
more?
a couple
Okay.
things about the novel.
Excuse us, just
it's like
one
a
more
real question I have that I haven't asked you yet, so it would be organic
Oh,
and
okay.
fresh
Oh, right.
when I asked you. There have been a lot of synopses of the book and reviews and interviews where they refer to a reveal at the end of the book, part of Laura's story that is saved to the end, and it's almost universally referred to as, oh, there's a secret. There's this big secret that's revealed at the end of the book. But I heard you rebut this once, and I want you to talk more about it. You said it's not a secret, it's private.
Right.
And what's the difference?
A secret is something that you are trying actively to keep from other people, and something that is private is just your own. I mean, I don't know if that distinction, well, you all know the language, you know the difference between secrets and privacy. But no, it's not a big reveal, and it's not a secret. Laura doesn't see it as a secret. It's something that is private in her life. And in the context of her daughters grilling her about every aspect of her life, she feels like there are very few things that are private. And there are a couple of times she talks about when they were little and how they're always climbing all over her. And every time she sits down into a chair, they're like, Mommy, 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 Mommy. And they're all climbing into her lap. And she's like, they're going to eat me. They're going to just devour me down to the bone. She said that Joe's going to come back and he's going to find a little playhouse built out of my bones because the 3 girls will have just eaten me up. They have so much love and so much need. And we all have things that are private.
That you just want to keep for you. And sometimes that is not met with a lot of generosity. Like even the daughters, like, no, but it's for us too. And the probing and the wanting to know and like, this should be mine. And she just puts a boundary down there and says, no, I get to keep something for me.
Absolutely. And also the girls keep plenty for themselves.
Right.
I mean, we know that Macy's boyfriend is broken up with her, and Emily doesn't talk about the fact that she's getting engaged to Benny. They keep all sorts of things from their mother, which hurts their mother.
Deeply. She's
Yes.
deeply hurt by not having access to every aspect of her daughter's lives.
Right.
But somehow it doesn't go both ways,
It
which is
does
also
go
probably
both ways.
very
It
common.
does go both ways.
It should.
It's
It
just
should.
that they don't, what they want for themselves, a little space, a little privacy, a little autonomy, they don't want for each other. Yeah.
How unfair.
How unfair.
It's just not very fair.
How unfair those mother-daughter relationships are.
What a subject. Someone ought to write a novel about mother-daughter
Do
relationships.
you know what the craziest thing is? I have been on book tour for 2 weeks. How many people have come up to me in the signing line and said, I have 3 daughters. I swear to you, this book could be #1 if it was only purchased by women who had 3 daughters. I mean, I never knew it was a thing.
Just, there's a whole subset, a
A
whole new audience.
it's like
Yeah.
a
Well,
subculture. Yeah.
And they have such great names, and those are actual names from your life.
Yes, I'd love to say that. So the oldest daughter is Emily, of course, because the mother is devoted to the character of Emily, and when she finally has a child, she wants to name the character Emily. And I have to say, when my own mother started to read this book in a manuscript printout, she was like, I really want to read it right away. Just print it out, print it out. And I gave it to her, and she said, I am not reading this. There are too many Emilys. And I said, maybe let's just wait till the book's published, and then it will feel like there are fewer Emilys. So Emily is the oldest, and Nell is the youngest, because I have several important Nells in my life, but I knew a woman named Nell Gifford, who was the founder of Gifford's Circus in the UK, and really the most profoundly moving experience I have ever had with art in my life was in 2016 when I saw Gifford Circus put on War and Peace in the Circus. I know, it's crazy. Is there anybody in this room who has ever seen Gifford Circus?
You can clap
No,
for that
no.
if you have.
Anyway,
Clapping.
it's still going on, but Nell died, and she died very young of breast cancer, and she left 2 small children, and I am very good friends with her dad, and so I wanted to put her in the book. So if I had an Emily as the oldest sister and a Nell as the youngest sister, then the middle sister would have to be Maisie, because my first editor, Dick Todd, and his wife Susan had 3 daughters, Emily, Maisie, and Nell, and they lived on a farm in Western Massachusetts, and I used to go and stay with them, and I don't have children, and I never wanted children, and the only time in my life I ever thought, oh, this would be sweet, is when I would go and stay with the Todds, because they had such a beautiful family, and those girls were smart and funny and sharp and mean and brilliant, and I loved their whole 5-person family dynamic on that farm in the middle of nowhere so much. So it was very nice to put them in the book. And almost everybody else in the book is named for somebody who works at the bookstore. Yeah.
The last question I have is about the bookstore, because not only do you work at a bookstore, you are the spokesperson for independent bookstores across the world, but you're also an absolute genius at prescribing what someone needs to read when they need to read it. And particularly, my own experience was when a dear friend of mine's daughter got cancer a couple of years ago, and was so ill, and in the mail just showed up Lori Moore's Birds of America
Oh.
with a little Post-it on people like that are the only people here, that story. And it was like medicine. It was like the prescription for the problem. It was so beautiful.
I just get chills just thinking about that story.
It's so great. Lori Moore's Birds of America. Everyone should read
Yes.
that collection of short stories. So the question is, what should we all be reading
Oh,
right now
I'm so
in this
glad.
room?
I'm
Tell us
so
what we should
glad.
read.
All right. You should read a book called Do Tell by Lindsay Lynch. It's a first novel. I think there might be copies here tonight. We had talked about it. We'll see. Lindsay Lynch is the buyer at Parnassus Books. She came to work for us when she was 21 years old. She went off to graduate school. She came back. She's 31. I have watched her work on this novel for years and work so hard, and it is beautifully done. It's about the golden age of Hollywood. It is funny. It's a great summer read. It's got a bit of a thriller thing going on. And it's also about how all the things that you think have changed since the 30s and 40s really haven't changed at all. One of the things that I think about, and Lindsay and I, the next leg of our tour, we're going on tour together, it's so hard to publish a first book. And it's a risk to buy a book from somebody whose work you don't know. And you're going to go and you're going to buy the Ann Patchett book, and I am so grateful to you. And I also want to tell you I'm doing fine. So I want you to take a chance on a terrific first novel. It reminds me of when I was 26 and going out with the patron saint of liars. And it's just hard. And the other thing that I think about all the time, Tom Lake is just doing great. It's getting all these reviews. Oh, you got it. You've got Do Tell. Thank you,
Oh,
please.
they do have Do Tell
Snap it
back
up.
there.
Snap
Good.
it up. Everything's going perfectly for this book. I am the luckiest person in the world. But I think all the time, what if this was Tom Lake by Lindsay Lynch?
Yeah.
Would you care? I mean, what you get credit for is your whole career. You get credit both when you're buying the book, but also when people are reading the book and when people are reviewing the book. They're reviewing your whole body of work in a way. And the fact of the matter is, it's a good book, but it wouldn't be what it is if you didn't know my name and it was my first book. So I am always looking to give Lindsay a leg up. I will also tell you 2 books that have just come out that I have read and absolutely loved. One of them is Crook Manifesto by Colson Whitehead. I have known Colson Whitehead since The Intuitionist. I've read all of his books. I loved Harlem Shuffle. It's a crime thriller, and if you haven't read Harlem Shuffle, it doesn't make any difference, but you might want to go back and read it. I thought it was terrific. The other book that I love that came out last Tuesday is Heaven and Earth Grocery by James McBride. And James McBride is an author that every single time he publishes a book, I think, well, that's it. Nothing could ever be better than that. And then he does something that's better than that. Before we get off of this, I'm going to tell you 2 things that you're going to want to know. One, I'm going to tell you what's going to win the Pulitzer this year. Because I own a bookstore, and all I do is read brand new books. And if I'm wrong, when you see the Pulitzers announced next year for this year, you're not going to think, well, Ann Patchett was an idiot. But if I'm right, your mind will be blown that in August she sat on a stage and told you that Absolution by Alice McDermott, which is coming out in November, is an astonishment. And I blurbed it, and I called it a moral masterpiece. This is her 9th book. 3 of them have been finalists for the Pulitzer. I have read them all. I am a big fan. Nothing that she has done prepared me for this book. In the same way that you think Louise Erdrich could never have gotten any better, and then she came out with The Night Watchman. Barbara Kingsolver could never have pushed herself farther. And then she came out with Demon Copperhead, which I gotta say, nothing prepared me for Demon Copperhead. That's what absolution is for Alice McDermott. And if that's not enough,
Wait,
I'm
there's
gonna
more.
tell you what's gonna win the Pulitzer for 2024. Right? Because that's how good I am. I am really thinking, Ben, the magician, you should put this in your act, right? Percival Everett, James. It's the retelling of Huckleberry Finn from Jim's point of view. It will rewire your brain. It's a game-changing novel. It is the book we need, and I was floored by it. So the problem with being a bookseller is the books I always want to talk about haven't been published. But keep those two books in your mind. Absolution, Alice McDermott, November. Percival Everett, James, March of 2024.
Great answer. Thank you. And we're getting flashed.
We're getting
there.
flashed?
We're getting
Okay.
flashed. I mean,
All right.
not flash.
And I love the fact that you're taking out
Flashing
your
the
phone
lights,
and yes,
from
and tapping
from
in
the
my
wing. So I
recommendations.
think that does mean it's time for a few questions. We can
Lights
bring
up.
those house
And
lights up.
and Erin, I'm going to let you pick.
Oh, I get to pick. All right. Well, if someone has a question, please raise your hand and stand up in a loud, clear voice, and I will do my best to repeat the question so that you can hear. Wow. Okay. Already a lot of questions. Okay. Well, the first and early bird over there against the wall. Yes, right against the wall. There we go. I'll listen.
Wait, what happens at the end of the second to the last,
the last chapter.
of Tom Lake? Go ahead, keep talking. Yeah. Okay. Okay, now I'm just going to keep repeating this because we want the people at home to hear. So whatever happened at the end of the second to last chapter is about show, don't tell. And when we talk about privacy, when did I know in my writing process that I was going to be writing that scene? So the way I work is that I make up a book in my head. It takes me 2 or 3 years. And when I've finished making it up in my head, I write it down. Now, sometimes there's something that I'm wrong about. Say, a dead body in Italy.
Unfortunately.
But most of the time, I know. And so that I absolutely knew. And it's, it's nothing. It's just not right. It's not wrong. It's just the way I work. So I have all of it in my head and sorted out. I have a friend right now who's going through such a terrible time, and she keeps starting novels and getting to page 30 or 40 or 50 and dumping it and starting over again. And I said to her the other day, she was like, "You don't ever do this." And I said, "Oh yeah, I do. I just do it in my head. And I think of things and dump them and think of things and dump them because it would break my heart to have to write them all down and then throw it away."
Somebody else? Someone from the middle? Right there, right in the middle of the middle. Oh, okay.
Oh.
The question was, have we known each other long enough that my husband and I were sources of research for The Magician's Assistant, her novel, The Magician's Assistant?
And the answer is no, because we met in, it was 1997. How old were you in 1997, Erin?
I was a freshman in college.
Oh, I thought you were going to say,
I was my first year at Sarah Lawrence.
you were like 8 or something. Okay.
No, my husband was like 8 or something then. He's much younger, magician.
So, no, that book came well before. However, I will say, when that book came out, my husband bought me an old magic poster of a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat that I gave to Ben when we became
now in
friends.
our bedroom,
Right,
and is amazing.
right. So the magic paraphernalia did go to them, but no, it would have been super handy had I known you.
He could have
the
researched
people that
that
I
book.
need to know, I meet afterwards. I meet the magician after. It's like I met Renee Fleming after I wrote Bel Canto. Although I met Barb before I wrote the book, so maybe life's getting better.
Somebody from that side of the room over here. I saw someone with their hand up. Yeah.
Oh, God.
Oh, the question was about the research for Bel Canto because she was living in Lima at the time.
How I went about researching the hostage crisis in Lima, Peru, to write the novel Bel Canto. Well, first I want to say the novel had nothing, I mean, I can't say it had nothing to do with it, but it was obviously a fairy tale version of a horrible thing that happened. And I went to Peru and talked to a bunch of people, and I never talked to anyone who was in the house because I didn't want to try and write a novel about what had happened, but I wanted to get a feel for the place. And most of the research that I did was about opera, because I didn't know anything about opera, but I was trying to write an operatic novel and a melodramatic novel, and something that was sort of sitting on top of a real event.
Anyone else? Okay, up in the balcony.
Hey, balcony.
Can you stand up? Thank you. State of Wonder. State of Wonder, her novel State of Wonder seems to cry out for a sequel.
Oh, a sequel. Oh,
Yeah, and you've never written a sequel.
but you just answered your own question, which is, I believe a novel should stop at the point when the reader has enough information to imagine the characters' lives themselves. You know, the difference between commercial fiction and literary fiction, and believe me, I am all for commercial fiction. It's terrific. But commercial fiction puts you in the back of a town car and drives you there. So if you like a John Grisham novel, and this is a good John Grisham novel, you're all going to have the same experience. It's not going to be like one of you is going to say, I don't know, I think it was this, or I think it was that. It's a commercial novel. They're going to come out the same way. Literary fiction is like being in love. And I bring half, and you bring half. And it exists in a space between us. And that's why one person can read a novel and love it, and one person can read a novel and hate it, because it has to do with the chemistry that you and the book make and can take forward. Nothing would make me happier than to know that you think about those people and you imagine their outcomes. That's not for me to do.
Any other questions? Oh, right here. Stand up, please. Thank you.
No. No.
No, because she was here at the end of September, so apples
That's
were
right.
starting to happen. Until today, we did go see the packing line today, and we got to see it all happening. So the timing was perfect.
But the question was, did I actually work at the Wunches? No, I did not. And it was so interesting to be back there today. And of course, cherry season's wrapping up, but they were still going down the conveyor belt. They were still getting washed. And I said to my friend Judy as we were driving back, part of me wishes that I had come back again and been there during the season. But also, if I had been back, I would have gotten too many details. I would have put too much in. Because again, you want to leave a lot of space. There are very few things that I dislike as much as I dislike a novel where the author has done an enormous amount of research and stuffs it all in the book and forces us. It's like, well, I learned it, so I guess you're going to have to listen to it. It's really good to just know a little bit and keep it held back. I want to call on you because you've got a ribbon around your neck, and
Ari?
therefore you deserve to ask a question.
Yeah, come on.
What advice would I give to a writer that was just starting out? Okay, I've got two answers to that question. One is, I have been answering that question for a really long time in a lot of different scenarios. And years ago, this would have been for State of Wonder. I was doing an event in Chicago on book tour, a big event. And before the event, I went to the bathroom. And it was a ladies' room with mini stalls. And there was a voice on the other side of the door that said, "Miss Patchett, what advice would you give to a writer that was just starting out?" And I thought, I need to write something that I could just say, this is all the advice I have in the world. And I'm going to write it all down and put it in one place. And I wrote an essay that is 60 pages long called The Getaway Car. And it is in the book, This is the Story of a Happy Marriage. Every piece of advice, discipline, procrastination, writer's block, friends, reading, rereading, getting an agent, getting published, all of it is in that one place. And when people call and ask, and this is what happens, my husband's patients or the other doctors in the group say, my daughter, who is 12, is very interested in becoming a novelist. She would like to have a weekend with your wife and ask questions about writing. And what I say is, I will give you this essay. You will read it. If you have any questions at all at the end of reading this, I will have lunch with you. One person, and this happened really recently, came back and said, I still have a question. It was the most appalling question. And we talked on the phone. We didn't have lunch. And I was so glad I talked to her. She said she'd written a memoir about being adopted. And she said, she's not an author. She doesn't pretend to be an author. She found a company that self-published. And she said, they've told me that it's amazing. They told me that it's really going to sell. And all I have to do is pay them $30,000. And I said, one of two things is true. Either it's amazing and it's going to sell, in which case you don't need them. You need to find a regular agent and a regular publisher. Or they're lying to you, in which case you don't need them. And I thought that was really worth it. So in a nutshell, if I could just send you back with some advice, read absolutely everything. Reading and writing are like walking on two legs. It's one and the other and one and the other and one and the other. Across all genres, across history, across things you are and are not interested in. The other thing is write in enormous volume. And that's one of the things that I talk about in this essay. Think of yourself as a corroded pipe full of sediment. And when you turn the faucet on, you get like drip, drip, drip. And the only way to deal with it is to put the faucet on full blast and let it run a really long time until all of that calcium buildup has been blown out of the pipes. The only way you can do that is by pushing huge amounts of water through. I'm not saying like, write, revise, have your friends read it, revise, just write and write and write and write and write and get all of the horrible writing that is inside of you out. Because there is wonderful writing underneath it. Don't try to fix the horrible stuff. Just barf it on out and get it done. And that really is what it is. You know, if people say, I've written 10 pages and I want to find an agent. Write 10 novels and find an agent. Yeah, good luck. You're welcome.
Any other questions? Any other questions?
There are tons of
Okay,
them.
we got a lot right over here. Black shirt. Could you stand up? Thank you. She really enjoyed Commonwealth, but it made her think about potential autobiographical themes.
Because that's a novel about my family. That's a novel about my people. And that's the novel that you would usually write when you were 25. But for some reason, I waited until much later because I never wanted to write an autobiographical novel. And then I changed my mind and I did. And I loved writing that book. And that is a book that could have been 3,000 pages. I was having so much fun writing that novel. And I talked to everyone in my family beforehand. I got everybody's permission. When I finished, I let everybody read it before I published it. So that was all cool. My stepbrother did not die. And there was a very funny moment. I was doing an event with a writer who I adore, who I wish would publish more books, Adam Hazlitt. Did you ever read Adam Hazlitt, You Are Not a Stranger Here?
No.
That's somebody I need to make a Friday video about. He's an amazing writer. And we had both published autobiographical novels. His was called Picture Me Gone, which is terrific. And we were talking about it on stage. And then in the book, his brother dies. In my book, my brother dies. And we were walking to the signing colonnade. And I said, so did your brother die? And he said, yeah, he did. He died. He died really just exactly the way he died in the novel. Did your brother die? And I was like, nah, I just killed him. And I hadn't seen my stepbrother Mike since I'd published the novel. I mean, it had just come out and I'd sent it to him. And there was this huge long line and there was this like little buzzy center. There was a whole group of women standing around some guy and they were going, it's Cal, he's really Cal. In real life, this guy's Cal. And he gets up and it's my brother Mike. And he goes, why did I have to die? Swear to you. And I was like, I'm sorry. I mean, it had to be one of us. Yeah, so.
Do we have time for any more? We have time for one more question. I've
Make
only
it
gone to
good.
the balcony once. So hand up in the very back with the blue shirt.
It's Randy.
It is Randy Chapman.
Hi, what's up? What a good question, Randy.
Where can we find Ann's
Thank you.
recommendations?
Every Tuesday morning, I have something called the Laydown Diaries on Instagram, which is when all books come out on Tuesday, and I hold up the new books for the week, and I recommend them. And then on Friday from the bookstore, every Friday we have a series called New to You. If you haven't read this book, it's new to you. 2 best recommendations I've ever given I got from this woman, Mrs. Caliban by Rachel Ingalls, and Edna Ferber's So Big. And I'm like, hey, have you not read Edna Ferber's So Big? Well, okay, it came out in 1939 or something like that. So if you haven't read it, it will be new to you. I recommend books constantly, and I also, the main thing that I do for the bookstore is we have a first editions club, which I like to say is like Fruit of the Month Club that doesn't rot. And what that means is I am constantly reading books that are 4 or 5 months out from publication. I pick the best book in July, the best book, or the book I like the best in August, in September. So, for example, if you were a member of the First Editions Club, you would have gotten Lindsay Lynch's Do Tell in July. You would have gotten Jim McBride's Heaven and Earth Grocery, a signed first edition, mailed to you. I am actually not doing a sales pitch. This is how I recommend books, and you would get the Alice McDermott, and you would get the Percival Everett. Just saying.
Just saying.
Actually, whenever I go out, my sister Heather is in charge of the First Edition Club subscriptions, and she always is saying, would you just shut up about this? Because we've got as much as we can handle. You go out on book tour, and then all of a sudden people are mysteriously signing up for books. Okay, can I tell you how the rest of the evening's gonna go? All right.
Do.
So, I just find that if you tell people what you need up front, it goes a lot better. I don't want to snuggle with you. We are at the, there is still a little bit of a pandemic going on. So you can't come around the back of the table and hold me in your arms while your sister figures out how to take a picture with an iPhone for the first time in her life. Oh, you laugh. But the amount of time of my life that I have spent in the arms of a stranger while another stranger tries to figure out what an iPhone is a lot. So there will be no snuggling. If you want to take a picture of me, go ahead, take a picture of me. I don't care. That's fine. There's that part. The other thing that I want to say, there he goes. Yeah, he's cooked. The other thing is there are a lot of you here, and if you... Cold. Okay, wait, one more detail. There are a lot of you here, and if you all come up to me in the signing line and tell me about how you always wanted to play Emily in Our Town when you were in high school, but you didn't get the part, and then you burst into tears, we're gonna be here all night, and I have a 6 o'clock flight out in the morning. So the way you do this is you come up to the table and somebody will have a Post-it note. Hang on. Oh, who's a big dog? Somebody will have a Post-it note and you'll write your name on the Post-it note, and then you'll walk up to me and you'll say, that was so enjoyable. Thank you for coming to Traverse City. And I will say, are you Jane? And you'll say yes, and I'll write your name. Or you'll say, it's my sister's birthday. And I'll say, happy birthday, Jane? And you'll say yes. And then you will move along because there are going to be 500 people behind you. So, again, not to be rude, I love you. I would love to hear every single thing you have to tell me, just not tonight. All right, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Erin. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Ann. Thank you, Erin. Both of you, we are going to do one thing. Everyone, if you would hold your book up Thank you. Hold them high, and Sean's going to take a picture. This will be very cool on Instagram. 1, 2, 3. All right. We'll see you in the lobby.